Now,
Hello, Adam. How you doing?
I'm fine. How are you, Fred?
Oh, I'm terrible. I'm terrible. My brain's not working today.
Oh, God, I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, well, fortunately, we're here talking about brains.
Yeah, so maybe we could get yours fixed today. And welcome, everybody. This is Fred Cohen and Adam Gordon in the OSG We Grow Cybersecurity Companies podcast.
Wow,
And
that
we're
sounds
here today talking about how your brain works on marketing.
so this is like, that commercial with the frying pan.
Exactly.
They say, your drugs, your brain on drugs, and something's frying up in the pan.
And something's frying up in your brain when you look at marketing. There's no doubt about it. And we're going to talk about how that all works today.
So the question is that a commercial for drugs or against drugs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess it depends if you like fried eggs or not.
Well, or fried brains, right?
Or fried brains. Yeah, well,
the story about the guy that's, says, I don't have a drinking problem. I drink, I get drunk, I fall in the gutter. It's no problem.
No problem. Yeah.
So it's all about perspective, which is largely about the brain issue, right?
Exactly.
So let's just talk. Go ahead.
And your brain has a bunch of different areas that they all kind of talk together. It turns out that the brain is less than a network, as people thought it was, as a network of networks. There's a bunch of different parts of the brain that do different things, and they all talk to each other through various kind of mechanisms. And we'll maybe get into some of that today.
Okay, too complicated for people like me. So, when I talk about brains, when I think about brains, I've studied this stuff over time. And so I do everything, obviously, at all.net, and I go into deception for protection, and I go down here to somewhere, a framework for deception, and we're going to get into talking about the cognitive mechanisms, right? A model for human deception.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that'll have a model in there somewhere, and let's get to the pictures here. So it'll take me a minute to get to the pictures. All right, so this is the fundamental difference between you and me, right?
Yes.
So I'm like the left half of the brain, okay? I want to work in this part of the brain that says everything is logical and rational and reasonable. And I always want to, here's a model.
Mm-hmm.
So get back to that model there. And this is I'm going to widen the screen here so we can see the model more clearly. And this is due to Dave Lambert, who was talking about deception. And we'll talk about this in a minute, but so this is what you're going to see from me all the time, right? I'm going to come in with, I've done, however many months of research and read however many hundreds of papers or books, and I'm going to create a model and make it into a picture that's understandable, except of course, probably you don't understand this until I explain it. And so that's now. Let's go to what Adam does. Oh, I gotta get to the home page.
Okay.
Here's what Adam does. Adam just makes a picture. He says, here.
Much faster.
Is that what you meant? Oh, yeah, thank you. So I talk about mechanisms, and I'm trying to learn more about it. But all right, so the brain. Sorry it took so long to get to something that should be so simple.
Well, it's actually common when you talk about the brain. And, typical of your models, Fred, this is hard to understand until you talk somebody through it because it's directly out of your brain. And one of the things I'm working on with Fred is to try and bring in a little bit more design into some of your interfaces because it just makes people more comfortable for them to be able to work in it. And ultimately, if you're a cybersecurity company or you're anything like that, you want your clients to be comfortable and even happy using your product. So a lot of that has to do with how things look and how they feel and how they all work together and being able to plan that out before you actually start designing it.
I'm sorry, I missed that part. My brain was somewhere else.
Oh, yes, see? So you've got to think about cognitive functions and cognitive attributes as you design these things. And the new academic area of design thinking, there's a new design school at Stanford, there's one at Harvard, there's a number of high-end universities around the country these days that have design schools. And what they would do is look at this and say, well, what does the end person really want from this? And then alter this so that those kinds of questions get answered pretty immediately through this picture.
So now it's interesting that you bring that up, because I've been watching a series on Netflix it's called Abstract, but it's about how designers do design, and it's like an hour plus episode of a designer talking through how they do this design stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating. They're effectively all artists, except not. So you got the guy who's responsible for Air Jordan, for example, right? And did that line of shoes, and he was a pole vaulter, okay? And so it goes through those stories and sort of explains, how this stuff, how they did this and what they thought of. And it's fascinating to watch. And it's marvelous to see what they're doing. And the problem, part of the problem that I have with this is that they explain it and I try to pick it up, and you get maybe a meme every few minutes that they sort of walk through, talk through, and it's pretty interesting and compelling, except it'll take me like a whole lifetime to understand what they've spent their lifetime doing. And my goal is for it not to take a lifetime, but to take, an hour or half an hour or something like that, to be able to understand it, work through it, and come up with an improvement. So the way they work is also very different.
Yeah.
Right? So the way I work is I'm trying to do something all the time. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And that's just not how design works. Is that right?
Well, sort of. Designers are always trying to do something, but they can immediately see the effects of what they do. And, they will immediately get reactions. You have to worry less about other people's perceptions of this, because you're doing it mainly for you and for you to understand things. When we start getting into designing things so that people perceive them a certain way, that does in fact become a very complicated procedure, because obviously everybody has their own perceptions. And in order to speak to a wide range of them visually, you need to have certain knowledge and certain abilities to be able to implement that knowledge in a way that really does affect people. And yes, it can be extremely difficult. It can be extremely nuanced, and it's always extremely subtle. The visual cortex of the brain is the fastest part of the brain. It operates something like 10,000, 30,000 times faster than your prefrontal cortex, which is where you do all your higher thinking.
So when you say higher thinking, you mean when my brain's on drugs?
Yes, exactly. When your brain is in that frying pan. No, when you're doing logical executive functions, thinking really thinking things through, that's all happening in your prefrontal cortex. It's the newest part of the brain.
All right, so we're going to go back to Lambert's model, which talks about that very directly.
Okay.
But before I do that, so one of the things that I did to try to consolidate all the answers for that research is to create these one-page drawings, which I ended up putting on a scroll.
Mm-hmm.
So, we printed them, you can print your own wallpaper.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was on a wallpaper scroll, I had a place print up all these slides, and I would carry it as a scroll. And when we went to consulting gigs beforehand, we'd all meet for breakfast before we went into the customer, and I'd take a page off the scroll and talk about how we're going to be using this today.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, when you talk about sales and marketing, you're ultimately talking about influence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, this is a persuasion model. And this is, a well-researched model that was done probably 30 or 40 years ago as a PhD at USC. And, on the airplanes, you can learn how to negotiate these negotiation tapes and so forth.
Sure.
This is the guy that did that. And so I got his tapes and got his books and read about it. And I put his model into this. So I did think it's sort of worth walking through this briefly, just so people get a sense of it. All the stuff around here, these are tactics, right? Out here and over here and over here. These are tactical issues. And then there's, issues up here, which are all more tactics. Tactics, I guess I called them mechanisms over here. and then there's this debugging thing where you have a behavior like aggression and apathy, and so the emotion is hostility. It's caused by frustration, and the cure is venting, right?
Okay.
So very useful for meetings and so forth. But when you look at the persuasion model, basically, if you're going to make a change, right? Change comes from learning and acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
So that's change comes from learning and acceptance. Learning comes from hearing and understanding, or seeing and understanding. There's a modal issue there,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's influenced by audience and motives and values over here, and audience information and language. So if you're matching their language, right, that's a matching thing. So if you're talking to a bunch of sailors and you're talking about airplanes, probably you're going to have a mismatch.
Or if you're talking to a bunch of Italians and you're talking Swedish, that's not going to work either.
Well, but we're not just talking about the language you're using. We're talking about
Yes.
the use of words and the way you talk about things, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So you need it so that when they learn, when they hear it and understand it, it's done in the right. You're providing the audience the right information and language for them to be able to learn from it. And you're trying to provide the right motives and values so that they liken it, right?
So Fred, where in this diagram would you put the cultural context of the communication? Would that be in motives and values?
It's there, but also it comes into the language, the way you're talking to them, the language you're using.
Okay.
So then there's acceptance, right? And acceptance comes from comfort with the message, relevance, and liking the idea. So there's cultural issues in comfort with the message, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not
sure.
It's also the messenger, but the message is different from the language, right? It'll never get into their brain if they don't hear it, right?
Yeah.
If it doesn't get past their first filters. And then there's the question of do they then accept it? So I heard it, but does it make sense to me, right?
Yeah.
Am I comfortable with it? Is it relevant? Do I like the idea, right? And that stems from this audience perception and role. So, if you're talking to the CEO, you can talk about doing mergers and acquisitions. And if you're talking to somebody that works in the mailroom, that's really not going to be relevant.
Relevant.
You say, okay. And then there's attitudes and emotions, right? So, if you're, pitching to me, probably your pitch should not be about, how much you love and therefore cybersecurity is important to you, right?
Exactly.
But on the other hand, there are cybersecurity pitches that are pitches directed very specifically at protecting your children,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you can imagine, we have something that tracks their phone. It's not because we want to invade your privacy, son. It's because Julia's daughter got kidnapped.
Right.
Right. So whatever that emotion is that you're trying to use to trigger. Okay. So then there's the rest of this model. I don't want to spend too much time on the model because we actually have videos on the model that we can walk you through and so forth. But there's a lot of this stuff. There's group changing. So if you're going to try to change a group, there's a cycle of resistance. You see that up here,
Mm-hmm.
And how you overcome that. And there's a planning methodology, and that's the top half of this. And then there's the issue of power and influence and how you get people to change their minds within an entity, for example, and so forth. But again, without going into all the details, we're talking here about the brain, and the reason we're talking about it is because, this is what you're trying to get at. So Adam, do we have some examples of some good and bad influence tactics, or maybe you can take over because I've been talking too much.
Sure. Let me just bring up the screen real quickly. And,
okay, I'll stop my share.
Okay.
And then you can do your share. So.
Okay. Where did my screen
This is the
go?
part of the presentation without pictures.
That's right.
But that we're doing this live. This is us. This is how we deal with the world. This is when we talk to clients. We don't always have the next picture.
That's true.
Things actually do take time.
Things actually.
But I'm not that patient. So where is it? Let's go, man.
I'm looking for it. I know I captured this website the other day.
Oh, well, while you're doing that, because it's my nature, I'm just a person that always wants to do stuff.
Okay.
I'm going to bring back Lambert's model and just talk briefly about it. So this is, you sense things from the world. And this is based on physiology here too, right? So you sense things from the world down here in the bottom left-hand corner. And that comes through, it's minimally processed on its way up to feature perception. So, in your eyes, you detect things like lines and colors and so forth. And same in your hearing, you perceive features. And then from the features, you build in your brain form on the way up that left-hand stack. And then you get into this basic comprehension where you associate things with structures. And at some point you get up into that top part of the brain where you do this, you understand what you're seeing, you observe, you hypothesize. If you're trying to do an activity, this is oriented towards performing a particular activity. We're talking about somebody trying to, in a military situation, which is where Lambert did his work, where you're trying to, convince the opponent that you're not there so that they don't shoot you, for example. So you're trying to determine your solution options and then initiate actions in response. And then when your response, that comes down the stack, the action stack on the right-hand side. But there's also a direct connection between sensation and action. So if you see sense at the bottom left, you detect it and you have reflexive controls and you react. And so if a hot thing hits your finger, you move your finger away. And if something's coming towards your eye, you blink, right? And as you move up, you have conditioned response. So you train people to respond to things. So when we're in the internet and getting an advertisement, when we're in a person-to-person thing in a meeting and somebody's telling us something, the first thing that happens is this reflexive response. So a lot of emails, there's almost a reflexive, it's trained, but it's getting down below, lower in the brain than training in some cases, but it's at least a trained response. I see this, I do that. So when you see something that looks like spam or that looks like an ad, that's going to be your response, right? You can't help it. And so part of what you're trying to do here is create images that cause people to stop and think, because you want them to spend some of that time, some of that mental energy on you. That's what you're bidding for, right?
Right.
By the way, as soon as you have those examples up, let me know and we'll switch to it.
I've got one. I'm just trying to.
I'm going to stop sharing and you can share.
Okay. I'll start sharing my screen. And I want you. Okay, so coming up.
There it is.
And you should be seeing my screen now.
Ooh, one player.
One player. Well, I meant to cancel out or blank out the name of the company here because I don't want to make them angry, and they're a potential client, God knows. But
no, I think, this anonymity. So this is one of the things about working in cybersecurity. You're always trying to, not say things, right?
Yeah.
And I don't like not saying things. I would rather just call them on the carpet, but I understand that there is the potential that, you could get sued for telling the truth. Oh, I'm sorry. You can't get sued for it, but you won't lose, but it'll be expensive. So we apologize. Anything we intend to say now about this company isn't personal. It's just about our perception of, all right, enough of this bullshit. Go ahead, Adam.
All right. So why is this a bad communication? So let's look at this for a second. First of all, there's absolutely nothing in here that is visually compelling. Little strange monsters with chainsaws and guns sitting down says nothing to me about what this company does. And in fact, after I looked at this site and I read it, I still didn't know what the company does. It's something about endpoint security and filling the endpoint security gap. But if you read,
you see, they stop threats regardless of time, team size, skills, and tool set. But you're right. I don't understand what they're doing.
Yeah, and the words in every industry, there is one player who makes the absolute difference. There's nothing here that says Minerva is that player.
Oh, is that the name of the company? I
That's
didn't.
the name of the company. Yeah, it's down here under the left side teal guy.
You mean, wait, I don't see it.
Uh, let me see what you're.
All right, well, it's there somewhere.
It's
Okay.
there somewhere.
Yeah, well, okay, good enough, right? So that
All right.
so you would think that the name of the company, would be like in or some logo for the company would be somewhere near the top left-hand corner, right? Because normally you can do top right-hand corner, but it's not observed. So the brain, so it's actually different depending on how you learn to read, right?
I just fixed my share, so you should see the whole screen now.
Oh, it's even better, and I still don't. Oh, it's down at the bottom.
Yeah.
All right. So the way people see things, the way it gets into their brain here, is for people that are from the West, right? But it's top left to top right across,
right?
And then it moves down into the middle and around. But if you're from if you're from Israel, it's right to left. If you're from China, it's top to down.
Bottom, top down, left to right.
Yeah. So again, there's this difference. This is just how they process because they've been trained because of the way they read. So putting the information in the right place sequences how it gets into their brain, right?
Exactly. And the visual cortex of the brain is, as I said before, something around 30,000 times faster than most of the rest of the brain. So if there's nothing in your communication that visually draws somebody in, or that makes a statement through some kind of picture, or you don't make it a pleasant, at least, thing to look at, then you've lost that ability right there. You lose the first couple of tenths of a second while the brain is interpreting this and figuring out how to react to it. And if your communications generally don't cause somebody to have some kind of emotional reaction, generally they're not going to be so interested in what you say, unless there's somebody like Fred, who's a very left brain kind of guy, and he gets excited by words. Most people will see this and just kind of not feel a lot. And that's the first mistake that most marketers make, is they don't provide some kind of pleasant, comfortable, communicative visuals to first grab that customer. Because if you don't, in any of your communications, cause some kind of emotional reaction, it's very difficult to get people to read or listen or consume whatever it is you're putting out there.
So I'm working on moving to my right brain. It's just that my left brain has been so comfortable for so long. So just some other visual aspects here. Again, we're just talking about how the brain works.
Right.
So low contrast sucks, right? High contrast is what they're going to see. It's what's going to pull them. So here, what you're going to see first is one player, big near the top, bolder, and what our customers are saying. And the rest of it is all sort of just low contrast, right?
Right. Now, some of that might be because I have my computer in dark mode. So maybe they're losing some of it. But that still doesn't count because somebody should have tested for that.
Well, and you're in dark mode usually. But can you switch it to light mode and see what we see?
Sure.
So one of the problems is these compelling players they're in this blue smooth thing, which doesn't look like threats. It looks like they're not that threatening. One's laying down, with his elbow under. So, they're not really that threatening. Okay, now here, the guy on the left looks unhappy. They're crying, right? One's sleeping, one's crying. That's not a threat. It's not coming at me. Okay?
And now, the other guy is sleeping with a chainsaw and drooling.
Right, or whatever. Right, and the color, just that color blue, is not a threatening color. Red is the threatening color.
Right.
Blue is associated, with the sky and the ocean, and it's just not threatening. And then there are no sharp edges on them, right? They're all smooth.
Right.
But again, that's sort of the cartoony. Okay, he might look like the devil, but he's crying. He's just, he's a lovable kind of character.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And
the one player. Why would one player be the two words you want to get stuck in my brain here?
Exactly. And how does that make any reference to the company that's putting this out? So,
and is this an NEC product or is it Minerva?
That's another good question. And
we don't know the answer, right?
And at the bottom it says orchestrating a brighter world. So is this for an orchestra conductor? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's it, but
Yeah,
it's not telling me something useful, right?
right.
All right. So now, but now let's look at the bottom of this screen in gray with a double quote. Is it on the left, but nothing on the right?
Right, right, exactly.
We have now. Suppose this was the headline: Minerva's anti-evasion platform efficiently prevented malware that targets OT environments. Okay, that would almost be better than the whole rest of this screen, right?
It absolutely would.
Is there more to this screen? Does it scroll down?
Yes.
That's the beginning of a quote from a customer? Oh, there you, oh God, and then there's this guy. All right, scroll. If you just took that quote, in quotes at the top of the screen and said, click here, I think this would be like 50 times better.
I'm willing to bet that they would get a better set of data out of this than they're getting right now. This would be a much more responsive site. I mean, basically,
if that's all they said, right?
Right. When it comes to websites, latest data says you've got about 7 seconds to make an impression. And if you don't make an impression in 7 seconds, nobody's clicking through to anything.
All right, take me to the top of the screen. Scroll to the top of the screen, 7 seconds, one player, some pictures, what our customers are saying, can't see it, it's way off the bottom of the screen. Stop. All right, I'm done.
Yep.
Because there's nothing here that says you're interested. In every industry, there is one player who makes it. What?
Yeah.
So there's some generic statement about the shoemaking business, right?
Right. We make great shoes. Somebody makes great
that could
shoes.
be what
You
they're
should be
saying,
wearing
right?
them.
Yeah, these guys could be shoemakers from the other company that are unhappy. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. So now because I'm talking about the words and you're talking about the images, but part of the problem here is neither the words nor the images do it in this example.
Right. This is a site that was designed because somebody thought this looked cool. This was not designed with design thinking in mind. If anybody listening to this, if you go to ge.com right now, I think that's one of the best examples of design thinking, because they figured out if somebody's at ge.com, they don't know what they're looking for. And so they offer you a very easy way to search, and it promotes GE really well. This doesn't do any of that. They have no idea what somebody's looking for when they come here, and they have no idea, therefore, how to supply it.
I'm taking over the screen, and because when you mention ge.com, of course, I have to go there because that's how I am.
Okay.
So here's ge.com. It's a little bit slow to come up. Okay, well,
that may be because of Zoom as well.
Well, no, but it's still going to be a little slow to come up because it's got all the graphics. But still, it's beautiful graphics.
Beautiful.
Right?
They're beautiful.
Yeah, and it's themed. It's in a color theme that's consistent.
Right. Are you going to take the screen, Fred?
I already have the screen. You just don't see it. You're not looking. So it's a beautiful blue theme. Everything is done in the blue. Everything is softly brought into the background. So those images are saying associate GE with stuff in the world that does stuff, with medicine, with aviation, with healthcare. The words are going by. It's always GE Power, GE Renewable Energy.
One of the cool things about those words is those words aren't just preset. Those words are actually tied into how frequently people are looking for stuff on the GE site. So that's actually live data on what people are looking for here. So
if I type in, medical, okay, so it's got that, oh, I love it, okay. So whatever I type in, it's gonna, bring me, so that nice, mechanism, which I didn't know how I was using, medical accessories, oh, that's what I was looking for. Medical analytics software, okay, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
There you go. And it still has that nice blue, the continuous shade of blue. And so it's just well thought out, interesting pictures. There's nothing perfect in this world, but you're right. This is a lot better than the other one.
Yes.
But this is GE, huge monster company with gobs to spend and lots of time and effort. So I'm going to take us back to OSG and talk about when you did this, what was your design? What was your path here that brought you to that?
Sure. Well, part of this is a kind of a design experiment that I'm trying out with OSG, which is we're going to have the site evolve as the customer base evolves. So this is very simple because we're just starting out. There are final pieces of art for all of these. And as the site gets more use and we find out what people are doing, we're going to evolve the structure of the site and the art on the site and the words on the site in order to reflect what the needs really are.
Okay, that's all strategy. Let's talk about the brain.
Right.
So your brain hits this page. What do they see first?
What do they see first? The thing that they should see first is the logo, actually. And right after that should be our hackers, our heroes, because it's the next biggest thing. And then the brain's going to go to the pictures. And what it's going to see is a lack of color. And it's going to see something that is like, there's heroes and there's somebody who might be a hacker, but how does this all evolve? And so the idea was to get people to scroll a little bit.
No, hang on. First 7 seconds.
First 7 seconds. So our hackers are heroes, there's our tagline. And there will eventually be a hacker hero.
No, right now, first
right?
7 seconds.
7 seconds. So this is going to tell people that we are simple. We are not doing complicated stuff. We are going to approach this from a very pragmatic and straightforward kind of method. And we have hackers and they're heroes. So that's going to position us as somebody who uses the hacking tools and uses cybersecurity for the white side, for the light side, for the not dark side. And that's the impression we're trying to give out here. And that we don't do anything huge immediately. We take things slowly. We analyze.
All right, 7 seconds. It takes you like a minute to explain 7 seconds. 7
seconds is what you get in 7 seconds is it can take an hour to explain.
Oh, fair enough. All right. Yeah. So our hacker, now recognizing that this is a site, the purpose of this site, of course, is to get people to come in and ultimately decide that they want to pay us to help them develop their marketing, their go-to-market, their projection of their image of themselves out in the world. And ultimately the goal here is that they make more money, they make more sales, right? So our hackers are heroes. To me, when I see this, I say our hackers are heroes. This seems like what one of our customers would love to use, right? This is like a sample, right? And this to me says this is the design process. Okay, OSG security, our hackers are heroes. This is just an example of the kind of thing you might see, and that someday, with this as an idea, we might end up with a real superhero here, saving your business or something like that. Our hackers are heroes. And then down here, off the number one screen, we talk about what we do. But in any case, I don't think our site's perfect.
No, absolutely not. And by the way, my interpretation of this was, the guy on the left is the hacker being busy and doing all of his stuff in this company and kind of being unrecognized, and the end state of the hacker being the hero of the company and is driving growth in the company. And that's what we're going to have your customers think that you do.
There you go. Now, next week, I want this in 7 seconds, but that's not your plan, right? So
no, it's hard to talk about what you get in 7 seconds because the visual cortex of the brain is really, really fast.
Okay, so just the verbal communication just is never going to be efficient enough.
Exactly.
A picture, of course, is well worth 1,000 words. A heck of a lot more than that, right?
Could be.
Perfect. All right. So next week, what are we going to talk about next week?
I think next week we're going to talk about some websites that could possibly use some improvement in getting their point across, and maybe we'll use ours as a first sample.
Really? That's what you had in mind? I thought you had some clever idea for next week.
Well, I think this will be clever enough.
All right. Well, I look forward to fixing our website by next week.
Well, hopefully we'll have some improvements.
All right. Well, having said that, this is already in the can, and we're already 30 minutes. We try to keep it down to 15 or 20 usually. But when you're talking about the brain, what can I say? I have brain pain.
Grant, Fred and I love the brain. Love people's brains. Everybody out there, we love your brains.
All right, turn off the recording.
All right.